Welcome to Studio Snack. In this month's episode, we look at less. In snacks, January is after all a month of resolutions, and in design where minimalism has made careers, movements even. I'm Lydia Thornley, a one-track designer turned multi-stranded creative practitioner.
And I'm Narciso Oleda, designer. Today I'm gonna keep it minimalist.
It's the end of January. We have reset, made plans, pledged to be completely different people. There are things we can sign up for. Dry January, damp January, who knew? It's about moderation, apparently. Veganuary, sugar-free January, which is challenging in a variety of ways, depending on whether you're trying to mend your ways or you're a business selling stuff people have given up for the month. Narcis, how's it gone for you?
I don't tend to sign up too much on these January things just because January is quite miserable in itself. But we used to do veganuary quite often, and that actually made some changes in our diet, and we're using some of the recipes daily now. What about you, Lydia?
Well, I have eaten more, not less. Goodness knows my workspace is freezing. But to be fair, some of my cooking has been accidentally vegan. There is the alternative of a digital detox, but it's not really a snack. Or is it? Arguably, we live in a world where we snack constantly on information.
Yeah, we do, and I find it quite tiresome. A lot of times you see all these people planning these amazing lives in January, and I have a question for you. When did a New Year resolution started? Where do they come from? Please tell me that you have some nerdery for us.
Of course I do. I've been delving into this. Festivals and rituals marking the start of the new year go all the way back to ancient Babylon in its Akitu festival. But interestingly, it was a different new year, the spring equinox in March, the start of the growing season, and more about making vows to keep the gods happy for the year ahead.
Kind of makes sense, isn't it? But when did it start on the 1st of January then?
Well, the Romans shifted it to the 1st of January and brought in a sort of behavioural spring cleaning, all about starting the year in the right way. It's recorded in the poet Ovid's account of the Roman year, so that's closer to what we have now. I have no idea whether this is true, but I found a story that knights would renew their vow of chivalry, this was at the end of the year before, by placing their hands on a live or roasted peacock, as you do.
You could lose some fingers.
They're feisty creatures, peacocks. Centuries later, the Puritans in America brought in an approach about reflection and abstinence, which was closer still, and the Methodists had their version too, brought in by John Wesley. But breaking resolutions has a history too. There's an article in an 1802 history of the Hibernian magazine mocking worthy resolutions. In the 1930s, I found a magazine article warning of people making resolutions they just couldn't stick to. So perhaps those of us doomed to fail should take the advice of a newspaper clipping from a 1976 edition of the Huddersfield Examiner. Never let it be said that I don't bring you a variety of sources. To resolve not to waste time and effort making New Year's resolutions in the first place.
I agree somehow. How does this translate into design?
Well, less is more, as we know, came from the architect and teacher of architecture Mies van der Rohe, the last director of the Bauhaus. Coco Chanel, of course, has a wonderful quote as well. Before you leave the house, look in the mirror and take one thing off. I try to live by that. I also like her quote, elegance is refusal, particularly if we turn it round to refusal being elegant in itself, a principle I think we do well to apply to the work we choose to take on.
That's totally true. But less is more is quite important to our practice because when you design, you always try to put everything just at the right amount and not adding stuff for the sake of it. A lot of times what happens is that clients ask you to fill out that blank space that you leave for breathing space or for guiding the eyes or balance the page. How many times has happened to you?
Goodness, yes.
But when you design minimalist, there is very little places where you can hide because design becomes nearly invisible. One of my favorite quotes is from Bruno Munari. He used to be in the Design Museum in the Wall. And the quote goes, to complicate, it's easy. To simplify, it's difficult.
It really is. Every detail has to be beautifully made.
And when you look at logos that work for many decades, are usually very minimalist logos, like the V&A, the BBC, the Channel 4 logos. They're all logos that they had minimal iterations through the years, but they pretty much, in essence, the same as they were. And they work very well in classic, in modern, they work absolutely perfect. I WhatsApp Teoman Ayas, an East London architect that works with us, and their practice, Meme Studios, they do embrace minimalism quite well. And I asked them how do they embrace minimalism, and how do they make sure that the designs don't look unfinished or cold as the reputation of minimalism has. And that's what he said.
So when it comes to the idea of the home feel within this framework of reducing the ornament and the clutter, then we try to make use of material qualities to bring a sense of warmth. So timber is one of the obvious alternatives here, or let's say it could be going for more textured finishes rather than smooth and shiny ones. The use of color is another tool at our disposal, although I personally find that much harder to discern.
And when I told them that our episode was about less is more, attributed to Ms. van der Rohe, I also asked them, what is the process? Do you design and then take things out, or do you start and then stop at the right time? And that's what he was saying.
Mies van der Rohe and his slogan, less is more, of course he's a seminal figure within the architecture discourse, and one can trace back the lineage of these ideas, concepts, all the way back to Alberti. His work at the height of modernist architecture included ideas about a universal space and this concept of universality that strive for equality amongst individuals. Since then, through postmodernism, I think this idea of the individual evolved. I think now we all strive for that individual unique expression in everything we do, and we can almost say more is more at the moment. So in our projects, we anticipate this. Especially in residential projects, we know that the spaces we create will be filled with artifacts of the individuals that will use them. This informs, I think, the restraint we have in our design approach that inevitably results in this so-called minimalist look at the end.
Fascinating stuff. Thanks, Teoman. The same goes for drawing. Loose line sketching looks easy, but to draw something that's moving or where you have no time, you have to look hard and think quickly to be able to sum it up in a line or two. And for all of these things you need knowledge. You need to have learned what you can take away for something to be still recognisable as itself. You need to be able to experiment, whether that's as part of a hand process or digitally. And you need to have learned the craft or the respect for the craft to make sure that something is well made.
Yes, I do. I always get fascinated when I see you drawing animals or people dancing, because I can see those micro decisions taking place live. And you also draw with a biro, which, as you say, you committed to the line because you can't really delete it. So for this episode, we have one experiment related to this episode, but we're also going to have like an experiment that's going to last the whole season, which is going to be trying to find a podcast jingle, but we'll explain that a bit later. Let's start for now with the brief of this episode. And the brief was quite minimalist, which it was make an image of a winter snack and simplify it to destruction. How did it go, Lydia?
On the January eating theme, I used some dried fruit and nut mix and sketched it on iPad. And because of the way Procreate software works, I did my simplification backwards. I sometimes have to think like that when I'm doing Procreate sketching. Exporting as I added details. So I did lots of different exports to JPEG and time-lapse. And I learned two unexpected things. The first thing was about the way I draw. In my head, I would rough out all of the shapes first. which would give me an outline shape and I could see if that was recognisable. But I'm so used to sketching in rapidly changing situations, particularly at events, that what I did was a speedy investigation of each thing, then moving on to the next thing while looking at the whole thing at the same time. The nuts and raisins weren't going anywhere, obviously, unless I ate them, but I was sketching them as though they were. The second surprise was when I ran the images through several AI alt tag generators. I don't normally do this. I write my own because I like to think about what information someone might find useful if they're relying on audio to imagine something. I expected the clearest to be the most detailed, but actually it was somewhere in the middle. Colour, but no background, though one generator preferred the light drawing. None got the raisins though, so I either need to up my raisin drawing game, or there's a colour that AI might understand better, or maybe AI just doesn't do raisins.
It possibly doesn't do the raisins. But
How about you, Narcissus?
So I went for an all-time snack because I don't follow briefs very well, of course, and I simplified a bag of crisps before it just turns out into a square, and it was quite interesting because when I kept the logo, in my case I designed a Walker's bag. You can simplify it pretty much to the square. But what happened if you take the logos before, and I asked my partner instead of using AI, was that he didn't recognize that was a bag of crisps until it started to see some marks, some seal marks and some crinkles on the bag. Before that, it was like, it's a square. So
it's really interesting, I think, and it's an exercise I can remember us having to do at college, and I've been teaching when we've run that exercise by students. It's all about really thinking about what makes that thing, that particular thing, and actually thinking as you look and analyse.
yes, there is the same exercise we had to do at college was simplifying logos, and that how far you can go into simplification before you stop recognizing the brand. So for the second experiment, we tried to do a jingle, and I used AI, of course, and I asked to use popcorn popping, bag opening bags sounds, but instead of using those sounds, it just kind of went and described, well, and it went and created a jingle with a catchy song, but it made me laugh quite a bit. It goes like this.
Bags rustle and pop, crispy munch don't stop, corn popping in the air, snack time everywhere.
Marvellous lyrics.
Not quite what we wanted, but
Not
it's
quite
funny.
what we were looking for, no. It's been a fascinating exercise, hasn't it? I came at it from a completely different angle, as you would expect. What I've been trying to do is to turn some of our script into sound effects. And I've also seen how AI interprets some of the images that we've produced. And with very variable results. It's interesting. I don't think musicians need to worry quite yet. I wanted to use source material that we had made rather than try and get it to produce something from scratch.
It makes sense as well, because I don't think AI would understand what you're trying to do anyway.
Well, what was interesting with the images is that the image AI translated best was an AI-generated image. So that was AI understanding itself.
Oh, wow.
Which was really interesting. And now what I'm trying to do is to sample things like kitchen sounds, bits of our script, and run them through an app that enables you to draw with sound to see what that produces. So to draw some of the things that we're talking about in our episodes and see what sort of sound that makes and whether it might produce a short piece of rhythm or something like that.
We'll put some of these sounds at the end of this episode just to see where we're at with things, but we'll try to do all this jingle through the whole season, and hopefully by Christmas we'll have like something amazing, or not.
Or not. Thank you for listening. Join us for another Studio Snack.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Studio Snack.
Studio Snack. Studio Snack. Studio Snack.